Hello and welcome to Fierce. This program celebrates the diversity of LGBTIQ identities and perspectives. Fierce is produced in Bundjalung Country at 2NCR Lismore and can also be heard on podcast at fiercefm.podbean.com and in New Zealand on Fresh FM, as well as all over Australia through the Community Radio Network. This is Peter Lena, and I want to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands where you are listening. They took care of these lands sustainably for hundreds of thousands of years and then shared this land with us at great cost to their own lives. I want to honour and thank them for the work they have done and continue to do to care for country and to sit on the earth. I also want to thank the fairies and crones who came before us in history to fight for our human rights, to love fiercely.
Fierce.
Hello and welcome to Fierce. On the phone from Brisbane, Theo Angus, who's a Balinese Australian witch who's got a great book out called Spirited, which helps people understand what paganism is today. Hi Theo, what was your morning ritual today?
Waking up, and often I just lay there breathing in this fourfold breath style, or counting square breath. As I breathe in, I'm dropping my roots down into the earth and sending attention and blessings out through the land and remembering where I am and whose land it is. And then I also send out a lot of gratitude, or as I'm breathing, meditate on what I'm grateful for. And then I often also do a practice called triple soul alignment as well.
Ooh, that sounds interesting. Can you tell us what that is?
Yeah, so in many traditions of mysticism, and certainly in the traditions of witchcraft that I work within, we teach or navigate three souls, or three parts of the soul. There is the animal soul, or the part of us which runs everything behind the scenes. It automatically, instinctually knows how to take in and absorb vitality and life force and to distribute it through the rest of the body. It's also the soul which travels in our dreams. It's a dream wanderer. And then there's also another part of the soul, or another soul, which we might call the breath soul, or the talker, or the walker on the land. And this is the soul that comes into the body at our first breath and leaves at our last breath before we go into that mystery. And this soul is a boundary soul, is the circumference to our center, is about delineation and demarcation and communication and expression in this world, the middle world. And then there's also the God soul, or the holy daemon, which is called many other names in different traditions. And this is the part of us which is intrinsically always connected to the source of the divine, or the deep well of mystery at all times. In that alignment, we consciously, mindfully bless each soul and bring our attention to each one at a time, bring life force through each, and then we offer prayer and breath to our God soul, who knows kind of what to do with it and equally distributes it through the rest of the body. And we often consider the body, or what the West calls the body, to be the contract and agreement drawn between these three souls.
Wow. And so, Theo, you spend most of your days reading tarot for people in Brisbane, as well as running workshops and writing books. How do you balance the magical realms with everyday modern life?
Well, to me, they're not different. So that's where I'll start. I was raised to know that they're not different as well. I guess I have a different context to most people. I hear a lot of people talk about balancing everyday life with magic, and I just don't think that way or experience that way. For me, there is no difference between what people would call spirit and what people would call material, or what people would call sacred and what people would call, mundane. I don't talk in those terms, but I understand how some people use them. Because I have this full-time job and vocation, and this is my 11th year being completely self-employed in this way, it's also very easy for me not to have that division. And I certainly don't see things like cooking or cleaning a house or answering an email to be unsacred or not magical. For me, it feels like those things are all connected in a great web. Because my life, it feels pivoted around witchcraft. Everything kind of goes into and out of that, including economics, tax, where I'm going today, what bus I'm catching, often it's related. Certainly I do things that aren't overtly about my teaching practice or about the practice of witchcraft, but because it all feels quite integrated to me, that's kind of my mode. Witches are taught to observe and pay attention to everything around us. And so everything is, where our practices and the way we kind of just exist is intended to help us be fully animal, fully engaged. And of course, we will experience division, and of course, we will experience suspension, and of course, we will experience not being fully engaged, but that's also part of the great chaos of it all as well.
You mentioned it was part of your upbringing, so can you tell us where you were brought up?
I was born in Bali, and I was brought up with the background of animism and spirit work, with contact to a living culture whose ways of life are exactly in that way. There's no real division between what is considered ceremony. It's all meshed together. And for those people who have been lucky enough to see actual Bali rather than just Kuta or Seminyak or the airport or anything around the airport, one would know that the daily and nightly rituals of offerings and ancestral veneration, and the way in which rice is grown and harvested, and the way in which Balinese people purify themselves, and the way in which they greet each other with blessings every day. So that's my background through my father, and that's just kind of created the default setting, really.
Oh, thank you. And like magic, we've got Magic Megan Dragon on the phone right now as well, who's a passionate witch in the healing arts and sciences and all things wild. Welcome to the call, Megan.
Thank you, Peter.
So you two are both doing a foundational class of magic and ritual. But Megan, I imagine you've got a very different upbringing to Fia.
Yeah, I come from an Australian Irish Catholic background, so quite different, very different. Except that for me, I've always felt a very strong connection with the wild and with animals. I spent a lot of time as a child playing with fairy folk, botanic gardens and in wild places when I had an opportunity to do that. So I guess my sense of connection with the wild and with elementals and spirit has been with me all my life despite my background.
When you describe playing with the fairy folk in the botanical gardens, what happened?
Oh, I was lucky as a child that I could sense and see and feel non-human beings and felt connected with them. And so just going into the shrubbery and spending a lot of time on my own playing in the bush and in botanical gardens with animal friends, and it wasn't something consciously that I thought about. I just thought that that's the way the world was. So it wasn't a great discovery for me in many ways. It was just the way it was.
So tell us about this workshop that's happening, The Elements of Magic, from the 17th to the 18th of August up in Brisbane. So what's going to be happening at this workshop?
I love Elements of Magic workshops. It's regarded as one of the core classes in the reclaiming tradition, and it's often a prerequisite for doing further classes within reclaiming. And so it gives us a good grounding and exploration in our relationships with the elements, so earth, air, fire, water, and spirit. We also learn ritual technology. I would say that one of the strengths of the reclaiming tradition is they've really honed ritual technology to a fine art, and it's an ecstatic tradition. So it's a lot of fun, and it often involves movement and use of the voice and singing chants. It's also the workshop about the principles of unity. For an anarchist tradition, the principles of unity would be the one solid document that's been crafted with a lot of blood, sweat and tears over many years to summarise what the principles of reclaiming are.
Can you tell us more about what an anarchist tradition is?
Because reclaiming's roots are in activism as well as in the fairy tradition, so roots are in feminism and the peace movement and environmental activism, then there is this thread of anarchism that goes through it too, in that we don't have leaders, so we don't have things like high priestesses and high priests. We analyse and critique and explore issues around power and power with and power over and power from within. And so we share leadership. So one of the things that we do when we're teaching is it's usually two people at least teaching. So there isn't one sort of leader up on the pedestal. And with our models of decision making and organising witch camps and other events, we do it collectively, and we rotate the roles of leadership, so there isn't one person that is stuck in that particular role. Elements of magic is often attended by more experienced witches and priestesses as well, because it's a really lovely experience to come back and remember and reconnect with the foundations of our craft. You always learn new things because each time it's taught by different combinations of people, different flavours of the reclaiming tradition come out.
I think the other thing I would say about elements of magic is that a person leaves, whether or not they then go on to realize they're a witch or identify as a witch, or whether they think, oh, I just really like these tools of earth-based magic. A person can leave elements of magic and create ritual in their lives on their own, or with their ancestors, or with the land and with the birds and with the fungi and the ferns, or the cracks in the sidewalk in the city, or the train tracks, or wherever they are, learning the arts of sensing, perceiving vitality and life force and how to raise and direct it, learning how to create ritual spaces and step into and out of trance states in lucid ways, learning how to ground and access deeper levels of power, wider levels of power, learning how to craft charms and spells that have deep impact on our emotional landscapes, and sometimes, and often, if we work them well, impacts on the rest of the web and on the rest of our lives. Certainly spells can, when one is really going for it, they can definitely create very vivid change and overt change. And, lots of singing. So if you like singing and chanting and listening to drum beats and having interesting, bizarre, and beautiful discussions on topics that aren't so, out there in the mainstream, but that are about connection and empowerment and the legacy of witches in the world, Elements of Magic is a marvelous place to come for that.
I'd love to hear from you both what magic is to you in your own personal connection.
For me, magic is about being connected. So it's being connected with nature, it's being connected with humans and other animals, it's using your intuition, it's about being open and aware and grounded, using your skills as a witch and your will to be able to make changes in the world.
I guess for me as a witch, witch's magic is a little different to the magic that other humans are capable of, because all humans are capable of magic. And then there's, of course, witches. And in the lore I hold most dear, that is not everyone in the world. So witch magic for me is a very kind of intimate, erotic, sensual connection with the wild, with the rest of nature, with this one, with the body as the tip of the iceberg of mystery. It is for me about realizing and claiming and surrendering into the reality that I am also invested with and created through and destroyed by the same powers that create and sustain and destroy all things. And therefore, with cunning and skill and art, I can too harness those same forces and create, sustain, and destroy. My witchcraft is deeply connected to folkloric ideas around the fairy people, around fallen angels, around heretical weavings with Christianity and the impact of Christianity on Europe and the world. And so a lot of my magic is deeply subversive. And I often think that witch magic is naturally subversive, as witches are the enemies of empire. And that is why I think we are a threat in all times and all places to empire and the workings of empire. So for me, magic is always about unsettling the foundations of cultures of domination, coercion, and control, and of opening cracks wider to ecstatic connection and intimacy with the infinite. And as Megan was saying, with the creatures of the wild, and some of those creatures aren't so dense, some of them the witch is able to perceive in other ways. We would call these spirits or mysterious ones. But certainly a mountain is a spirit and a mysterious one, and a river is. And magic for me is the way to mindfully, powerfully connect with those beings and conspire to create change, or simply to be with each other and to listen to wisdom that is inherent in all beings.
Well, it sounds like you're both witches that are helping the activisms happening around the planet for the climate emergency we're in. So thank you. I'm very glad that you got our backs there and connecting in there.
What I really would love is for people who are activists to come to learn strategies for making their activism stronger and more sustainable in the long term. So there's techniques like grounding, group work, and the way that we relate to our environment and to each other that can be very, very useful skills for activists. In my experience, I lived at Green and Common Women's Peace Camp, for example, many years ago, and we regularly use ritual and we use witch skills before we would go on actions. And we even did things like invisibility spells and lots of other spells that we did that we wove in with our activism. And it's very potent mixture.
You talked about it's an erotic connection for you, Theo. So let me ask you both about love and connecting to other humans and gender, because you're both queer people, and queer people have been gatekeepers in all cultures to connect to the spirit world, and that used to have a very strong role, and in the Western world now it's not so strong.
For me, love is one of the great mysteries, and falling in love and having my heart broken is to have it break open. I think that every human will probably experience heartbreak, and I think that the power of magic also is about transmuting that into the heart that is broken open to hold more love and to hold more holy risk and have more opportunity for depth and intimacy. And so I experience a great deal of love in my life of elders and friends and people that I mentor and people who mentor me and my initiates and my initiators. And there's a great deal of palpable love connecting us all. And then, of course, there is that erotic love, which may manifest as what people think of as sexuality. And specifically in the reclaiming and fairy traditions, which we've been speaking of, sex is considered one of the divine birthrights of being alive. Being self-possessed and sovereign and belonging to my own sexuality, my own sexed nature, by which I mean that I am a creature of life force, is really potent. And I love that I am part of communities and traditions that venerate the life force in that way, and also know that it manifests in diverse ways. Whether that is through the experience of gender or the experience of sexual connection and orientation and intimacy, and also people who aren't interested in sex in that way, but may have different experiences of what we're calling sex. And I think in a world and cultures that twist sexuality and have sexuality come out of the lenses of domination, coercion, and control, we of course also live in a rape culture, a very misogynistic culture, and we're swimming in the soup of so many interrelated systems of oppression. And I think that inhabiting sexuality and eroticism and intimacy, even in one's own body, is revolution enough sometimes. So I try to move through the world holding that kind of wild grace.
The connection to the wild, connection to the life force, allowing that life force to flow through your body is incredibly erotic and sensual. And one of the beauties of various witch communities is that there isn't such a strong boundary around, or, we don't tend to compartmentalize ourselves or each other around what roles are in the way that we relate with each other. That may be a sweeping generalization, but that would be my observation, my experience, is that many of us are interested in exploring the edges around what it means to be alive, what it means to inhabit a human body, what it means to be an erotic, sensual, sexual being. My experience of my sexuality and of loving women, for example, is that it is a sacred act, and that it is that loving connection between women is always a sacred thing for me. And it's like there isn't a boundary there between what's sort of mundane and what's sacred in connecting from the heart and connecting from one human heart to another. Love is an expression of the life force, and as Theo said, it is a mysterious thing, and it's that love is what connects us. Love is what connects humans, and love is what connects humans with other animals and spirits.
Oh, it's all so beautiful. Thank you so much for coming on to Fierce. And if people want to find out more, Megan, you're in the Northern Rivers and Theo's in Brisbane. Do you also go to Sydney? Where can people find out information about how to connect with you guys?
If you are a Facebook user, and not everyone is, there is a Facebook group called Southern Earth Reclaiming, 3 separate words, and you can find a lot of our reclaiming events are posted on that particular group. Currently, which I wish this wasn't the case, there is no other website. I think that's trying to be changed, in which all of this is kind of uploaded. My own website also has information. And certainly there are people down in Campbelltown and Sydney and the Blue Mountains and Melbourne and country Victoria who are teaching reclaiming core classes. Definitely they're happening up and down the East Coast.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thanks, Peter.
Bye. We're back on Fierce, and right now you can hear her rustling around in her shop in Tyalgum. It's the beautiful, amazing... Do I call you Kira Springs, or is that just a Facebook
Hi,
name?
this is Phoenix. Bring on the flames. You're listening to
Having
Fierce.
come to the OHEART Festival for the first time last year,
Yes.
you mobs just shine and put on the most beautiful opening of a heart experience for a music festival I've ever been to.
Yeah.
Well done.
Oh, isn't that lovely? Yeah, we do love our little OHEART Festival. Since last year to this year, the whole festival and the program has really taken on a stronger presence for sustainability. And I feel it's because in this year's turning, the whole climate situation and its awareness has escalated. So our festival has evolved organically in response to that. And one of the things that was a big awareness for me was being inundated on social media with all the bad news and all the bad stories and all the terrible pictures of everything. You do get overwhelmed and you do start to shut down and you just start to I can't actually take any more of this information in. And so part of the festival really is addressing that. And we do have screening rights for 2040 this year. And I don't know if you've seen that film.
Not yet.
It actually tackles that whole situation of let's not just keep talking the bad news about how bad it is, because those parts of the brain that assimilate that information shut down. The parts of the brain that actually can problem solve and find and create solutions that are available to us, and have that be what we're communicating as a festival, as an event, as a culture of people. In that, we have a fantastic 2-day speaker program, solutions that exist here local to us within the Northern Rivers region, Southeast Queensland region. So everyone who comes and attends from this wider catchment of people, they actually have solutions in front of them that are accessible to them. It's not something that's from, somewhere else in the world.
What are some of the things that we can tell listeners that you're doing? I know you're doing a hooked up lots of cups so people can use a cup.
Oh yeah,
wash
we've
it up
got the
and
little
reuse it.
mug wash stations. So when you go and get your cup of chai, there's different venues, of course. So the festival is throughout the whole village. So we have to come up with solutions at every single venue. So we've got little mug boards and crates with your cups, and then you can wash them, or our little volunteers are going to jump in and help wash them. So trying to reduce the amount of takeaway coffee cups that are purchased, because most people that are here for the day, they're not going to go and drive in their car. So they can literally just walk around holding a mug, as opposed to a takeaway cup that's going to end up in landfill. Things like disposable coffee cups are probably one of the worst things. And we all think that the new ones, the bio cups, are compostable and recyclable, but actually they're not. When you actually talk to waste management in local council, you discover that our waste management systems can't actually break down the inner linings, and they still don't break down, and it's still an issue. It's just an idea that it's no longer an issue. We have our big water drinking triple filtered Grander water system, and you just come and bring your bottle and you refill it for free. It's the Globlet cups for the bar area, because we've had to use recycled plastic as opposed to glass for safety issues. But these, you just hire them from the company, they get used, they get washed, they get sent back. It's zero waste. It's very exciting.
Yay! Good on you.
Yay!
What's the event that you're most excited about to go to?
I think personally, because I am a silversmith and I'm an environmental artist. So this year we actually have an environmental arts lounge, and we've got over 20 participating artists, including Neely Batchelor, who is doing this amazing reef installation that's totally made out of plastics that was going to go to landfill. And she's made this real life reef, and it's got lights and it's all painted, and there's jellyfish and turtles, and it's so realistic. But one of our themes this year is water is life. So we've got some artists that have really brought energy to that theme and bringing people back to feel how important it is we look after our water.
Oh, my heart.
I know.
Has it changed Tyalgum? Because Tyalgum's been famous for the music festival for a long time.
Yeah, it has. The thing I love about OHEART Festival is it actually really does represent all the different aspects that Tyalgum is known for throughout the year. We do have resident artists and artist galleries and exhibitions. We do have a strong culture for sustainability. We do have a strong culture for well-being. We do have a strong music culture. We have wonderful musicians every Friday night playing at Flutterbuck's Pizza. It's like, for one weekend, you can come and experience pretty much everything that we do all year round, but scooped up in one big weekend event, like a big celebration.
And most of the events are free, and there's just a few that are pay entry, but that's a bargain as well, like $40 for the whole weekend. So how do you guys cover costs?
I know, it's well, this year we're very lucky to have some sponsorship from Tweed Shire Council. They're recognising that it's a really positive community event. We have local sponsors, and we are a not-for-profit. So all we want to do is be able to cover our expenses, promote the event, have everyone have a wonderful, successful time, and have it be as accessible as possible. Last year, I had so much feedback on social media, particularly about how blown away people were by the feeling of the event. I was so uplifted, but they took that spirit away with them and it stayed alive.
Yes, I was one of those. It was such a beautiful experience, listeners. So it's a bit like going to Confest. You just go there every year. Or it's a bit like going to Burning Seed. You just want to be there. So how can people find out more about this festival?
Well, oheartfest.com. OHEARTFEST.com.
Thank you so
and
much.
Definitely, my pleasure.
Is there a musician that's playing that we could play for the listeners now that you really love?
Oh, the Heart Collectors. And there's a beautiful song that actually inspired the festival. Perfect festival song.
We love you, Kira. Take care.
Yay!
She gave us life. She's our home. She's the air in our lungs. Take for us to come face to face with losing our only one. You and me, we make two marks. So imagine the art, magic pain if we all participate. So step over the divide and connect the dotted line. We're all just points waiting to combine.
Thank you for listening to Fierce. This program celebrates the diversity of LGBTIQ identities and perspectives. Fierce is produced in Bundjalung Country at 2NCR Lismore and can also be heard on podcast at fiercefm.podbean.com and in New Zealand on Fresh FM, as well as all over Australia through the Community Radio Network.